Dad's text glowed on my phone. "Don't you dare wear that silly costume." I read it twice, the words hitting with the same sharp sting they always carried. He had spent years reducing me, dismissing me, shrinking me down to nothing. Tonight, though, his grip was already broken. My brother's voice came from the doorway, smug and careless. "It's just a Halloween outfit. You're taking this way too seriously." He chuckled, shaking his head as if I were still the kid who tripped over her own shoelaces at school plays. I didn't answer him. I only looked at the jacket folded neatly on my bed, its dark navy surface catching the lamplight. My fingers traced the 4 silver stars, each one earned with sweat, blood, and silence. Not one of them handed down, not one of them borrowed. I slid the jacket on slowly, almost ceremonially. The weight settled across my shoulders, not crushing, but steady, like the years of resilience it represented. In the reflection of the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I wasn't the daughter Dad ignored or the sister my brother mocked. I was someone they could never control again. The drive to the hall was long and strangely quiet. The city blurred past, lights scattering across the windshield, but I barely saw them. I thought instead of the nights, I studied under a flickering lamp while they laughed in the next room. Of the mornings, I trained before sunrise while Dad told me to give up and act like a real woman. Every memory lined up like a shadow in my rear view. When I finally walked through the hall's double doors, the chatter stopped. Rows of uniforms turned as one, heels clicking, spine straightening. The floor gleamed beneath the light, each step echoing, demanding attention. My father stood stiff at the back, his arms folded, my brother whispering something in his ear. They were smirking still, waiting for me to make a fool of myself. Then the air cracked open with the commander's voice. "Admiral, on deck!" The room shifted in an instant. Bodies snapped to attention. Silence fell so hard it seemed to press against the walls. I watched my father's smirk vanish, his face drained of color, his mouth opening, but no sound coming out. My brother's eyes darted from me to the stars on my shoulders, his jaw tightening. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to speak. The truth stood taller than any words I could throw at them. Have you ever had someone spend their whole life doubting you, until the day your existence itself became the answer? Tell me in the comments. And as the silence wrapped around us, I realized sometimes the sweetest revenge is not in shouting back, but in finally being seen for exactly who you are. The ceremony pressed on like a tide I couldn't slow. The commander's words floated in the air, proud and official, but all I could hear was the thunder of my father's silence behind me. When I stepped up to receive my pin, the clink of metal against fabric echoed louder than the applause. My fingers brushed over the stars as they settled into place, a final confirmation that this wasn't a dream, or a costume, or a phase. It was mine. I turned slightly, scanning the rows of uniforms, faces of men and women who knew what those 4 stars meant. Respect shimmered in their eyes, something my own family had never once given me. My father stood out like a broken note in the middle of a song, arms stiff, lips pressed into a line, a man trapped between disbelief and rage. My brother, meanwhile, stared as though he were trying to peel the jacket off my shoulders with his eyes. Afterward, the crowd thinned, and people came forward to shake my hand, their voices warm, congratulatory, steady. Every palm that pressed into mine was another reminder that the world I had built stood solid, even if my family had tried to crumble it beneath me. But then there they were, Dad and my brother, cutting through the crowd, my father's jaw tight as a vice. "You really went through with this," he muttered under his breath, as if I'd staged a scandal, as if my years of sacrifice were nothing more than a rebellious prank. My brother leaned in closer, smirking like always. "Guess you finally found a way to play dress up and get people to clap for it." The words should have pierced me. They once would have, but now they only skimmed the surface, unable to reach where they used to hurt. I let the silence linger, my eyes fixed on them, not flinching, not breaking. For the first time, I saw the cracks in their performance. My father's confidence wavered. My brother's grin faltered when I didn't rise to the bait. Behind them, I noticed my mother's old friend, Aunt Caroline, watching. Her eyes were wet, her hands clutched together as if holding in years of words. When our gazes met, she nodded, subtle, deliberate. A reminder that not all family roots rot. Some bend quietly until it's time to steady you. I took a slow breath. "It's not a costume," I finally said, my voice steady, quiet but sharp. "And I don't need you to clap." The space between us thickened. For once, Dad didn't have a reply. The stars on my shoulders felt heavier than ever, but not from burden. From truth. From finally stepping beyond the reach of their shadows. The reception afterward buzzed with laughter, the clinking of glasses, the low hum of string music. But near the back corner, where my father and brother sat stiffly at a table, the air was dense, brittle. I could feel their glares from across the room, like two shadows refusing to fade. An officer's wife approached me, smiling warmly. "Your speech was incredible," she said, touching my arm. "You've earned every bit of this. Don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise." I thanked her, but my eyes flicked back to the corner. Dad leaned toward my brother, whispering something sharp, his fingers tapping furiously on the table. My brother grinned in that familiar way, like a boy who had just been handed a matchbox and a pile of dry wood. I knew that look. They weren't done. They never were. Later, as I slipped into the corridor for a breath of quiet, my phone buzzed. Another text from Dad. "Take that uniform off before you embarrass us further." Embarrass them, as though my stars were stains, as though my career, my fight, my sleepless nights had been designed to shame them. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles whitened. The walls around me seemed to lean in, pressing close. My chest ached with 1,000 unsaid words. Every dismissal, every scoff, every time they'd told me I was dreaming too big. The door at the end of the hall creaked open. Aunt Caroline stepped in, her heels clicking softly against the marble. "You okay, Lila?" she asked, her voice gentle. I swallowed. They'll never see me. Not really. Even tonight, especially tonight, they only see something to tear apart. She came closer, her perfume faint and familiar, like childhood summers before everything had hardened. "Let them choke on their own blindness," she whispered. "The truth doesn't need their approval. It already exists." Her words sank deep. For the first time that night, my eyes burned, not from their rejection, but from the quiet kindness in hers. I tucked the phone into my pocket, refusing to reply to Dad's venom. Silence would be louder. When I returned to the hall, applause filled the air again. Someone raised a glass in my honor. Laughter swelled, and in the reflection of the tall windows I caught my own image, upright, steady, stars shining even brighter beneath the lights. My father's face across the room told me everything. He couldn't erase me anymore. My brother's smirk cracked, thinner now, almost brittle. And that was when it struck me. Revenge wouldn't come in one grand explosion. It would come in the slow erosion of their certainty, one silent moment at a time. The night deepened, but the tension only sharpened. Every time I crossed the hall, I felt my father's eyes track me, his glare drilling through the crowd like a weapon. My brother hovered nearby, his smirk pasted on, but his shoulders stiff with something less playful. Resentment, maybe even fear. I was shaking hands with an old academy mentor when I heard it. My brother's voice, loud enough to cut through the chatter. She only got it because they needed a woman to tick the box. The words slithered out into the open space, spreading fast, sinking into ears that didn't want to hear but couldn't help it. The mentor's hand froze in mine. Conversations dimmed for a heartbeat, then picked up again, lighter but different. I turned, meeting my brother's gaze across the room. He wasn't laughing anymore. He was daring me to flinch. My father sat beside him, saying nothing, but his silence was its own kind of endorsement. I walked toward them, heels clicking sharp against the polished floor, every step deliberate. The crowd shifted slightly, curious, expectant. When I reached the table, I leaned down just enough, so only they could hear. "You've wasted years trying to bury me," I said softly, my voice steady. "But the deeper you tried to dig, the taller I grew. Look around you. Do you really think anyone believes you anymore?" My brother's jaw tightened. My father's fingers curled into fists. "Careful," Dad muttered, his voice gravel. "Ranks don't make you family." I straightened slowly, staring down at them. "No," I said, "but respect does. And you lost mine a long time ago." The silence after was thick. I turned and walked away, not bothering to see the expression on their faces. The act of leaving them sitting there, small and cornered, was more cutting than anything else I could have said. Near the exit, Aunt Caroline caught my arm. Her eyes flicked toward their table, then back to me. "They're unraveling," she murmured. "I know," I said, "and I'm done stitching them back together." That night, when the hall emptied and I finally slipped off the jacket, I placed it carefully over a chair in my room. The stars gleamed faintly in the lamplight. For the first time in my life, I didn't see them as a goal or a shield. I saw them as truth, undeniable and permanent. And as I lay down, one thought pulsed steady in my chest. The war with them wasn't over, but the battlefield had shifted. The days after the ceremony stretched out in strange silence. On the surface, life moved as usual, meetings, reports, drills, but underneath, my father's words still echoed. Not directly to me, never directly. Instead, they bled into whispers carried back through others. "She doesn't deserve it. She slept her way up. She's just a woman in a man's game." None of it surprised me. It was his way. He'd rather poison the air around me than look me in the eye. And my brother, always eager for a spotlight, repeated the same lines at bars, at family gatherings, anywhere he could drop his venom and laugh as it spread. I didn't respond. Not once. That was my strategy now. Silence as armor, silence as weapon. But inside it was exhausting. The uniform felt heavier every morning. The stars seemed to burn on my shoulders, daring me not to bend. One evening, I was sitting in my office when the phone rang. The caller ID flashed a name I hadn't seen in years. Aunt Caroline. "Lila," she said gently, "your father's been speaking out. More than usual." "I know," I said flatly. "Do you want me to intervene?" Her offer warmed me, but I shook my head even though she couldn't see. "No. If I fight back the way they want, they'll think they've still got me. If I stay quiet, the truth will do its work." There was a pause, then a sigh. "You always were stronger than any of them wanted to admit." After the call, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the photo on my desk, Mom in her garden, sunlight catching her hair. She'd been gone for years, but I could still hear her voice. Let them laugh. Let them sneer. You just keep walking. That night, I attended another event, a fundraiser where the air smelled of champagne and polished ambition. As I entered, conversations dipped again, familiar, practiced. My father was there, of course, standing tall among businessmen, his glass half raised. My brother lingered near the buffet, already drunk, already sneering. When they saw me, their faces tightened. But something had shifted. People around them pulled away, slightly, their whispers turning against the source, not the subject. Dad's voice had lost its authority. My brother's jokes landed flat. I realized then that their campaign was failing. Not because I'd fought them directly, but because the stars on my shoulders spoke louder than their bitterness ever could. And yet, part of me wanted more than silence. I wanted clarity. I wanted accountability. The moment would come. I could feel it building, slow and unstoppable, like a storm far out at sea. It came sooner than I thought. A week later, I was invited to speak at a military academy, a place where I had once sat in the back row, invisible, wishing someone who looked like me, sounded like me, would stand at the podium. And now, here I was, the 4 stars on my shoulders, catching the light as I walked to the front. The room was filled with cadets, their notebooks open, eyes fixed on me. But near the back I froze. My father, my brother, sitting as if they had every right to be there, as if this was just another performance they could critique. I forced myself to begin. My voice didn't shake. I spoke about endurance, about failure and resilience, about the way glass, though fragile, can cut deeper than stone. The cadets leaned in, scribbling notes. Some nodded, some smiled. I saw myself in their faces. Halfway through, a hand shot up from the back. My brother. "Ma'am," he said loudly, his tone mocking the formality, "what would you say to people who think you're only standing here because of politics? That maybe merit wasn't enough." A ripple went through the room. My father sat beside him, his arms crossed, his smirk identical to the one I'd grown up with. For a moment, I felt 16 again, cornered at the dinner table. But then, clarity. I walked away from the podium, down the aisle, until I stood a few feet from them. The room was silent except for my heels clicking against the floor. "I'd say this," I answered, steady as steel. "Merit doesn't beg for recognition. It proves itself, day after day, year after year. And the loudest critics are usually the ones who never risked failing." I let the words hang there, my eyes locked on my brother's. His smirk faltered. My father shifted in his seat. When I returned to the stage, the applause that rose wasn't loud, it was thunderous. Cadets stood, clapping, their faces alight with something I'd only dreamed of years ago. I glanced back once. My father's face was pale again, the same shade it had been when the commander had called me Admiral. My brother's jaw was tight, his hands gripping the chair. In that moment, I realized something vital. Revenge wasn't about humiliating them in private. It was about letting the truth bloom in public, in spaces they couldn't control. As the applause went on, I felt a strange calm settle in me. Their power was slipping. Mine was only beginning. The Academy speech made its way into the papers the next day. Not the whole thing, just a photograph. Me in uniform, the stars shining on my shoulders, cadets standing and applauding behind me. The caption read, "Admiral Lila Morris inspires the next generation." When I saw it, I didn't smile. Instead, I thought of my father at the back of the room, his face crumbling under the weight of something he couldn't deny. By evening, the phone call started. Old relatives, neighbors, people I hadn't heard from in years. "We saw the paper," they said. "We had no idea. We're proud of you." Their words were kind, but they carried a shadow. They also revealed how carefully Dad had erased my victories all these years, how small he'd painted me in their eyes. That night, Aunt Caroline came by with a folder in her hands. She laid it on my kitchen table without a word. When I opened it, I found copies of old letters, applications, commendations, reports that my father had intercepted and hidden when I was younger. Evidence that he had tried to block my path long before I ever put on a uniform. "He gave these to me once," she said softly, "told me to keep them quiet, said you didn't need more fuel for your silly ambitions. I think it's time you saw them." I touched the papers with trembling fingers. Rage and sorrow tangled in my chest. But beneath it all was something else, validation. Proof that I hadn't been paranoid. Proof that he had always feared my rise more than he ever admitted. The next morning, I didn't text my father. I didn't confront him. I didn't need to. Instead, I forwarded the documents through official channels to the right committees, the right investigators. Quietly, legally. No yelling, no spectacle. Just a chain of evidence too heavy to ignore. Days later, the fallout came. Whispers turned into reports. Reports turned into questions. and questions turned into a quiet but damning announcement. My father's position on the city's Defense Advisory Board was revoked, citing conflict of interest and obstruction of merit. He called me that night. His voice was low, strained, almost cracked. You think you've won." I didn't answer right away. I looked at the stars on my shoulders, gleaming under the lamplight, and felt no urge to scream, no urge to gloat, just a calm finality. "No, Dad," I said. "I didn't win. I just stopped losing to you." The silence on the line was longer than any fight we'd ever had. Then he hung up. For the first time in years, I slept without waking in the middle of the night, bracing for his voice in my head. The weeks that followed felt lighter, as though a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had slipped from my shoulders. I still wore the stars every morning, still fulfilled the duty that had demanded every ounce of me, but for the first time in years, I wasn't doing it under his shadow. My father kept his distance. No more texts, no more whispers through relatives. My brother tried once, sent me a late-night message dripping with venom. "Enjoy it while it lasts. People like you always get torn down." I didn't reply. He was wrong, and I didn't need to convince him of that. Some truths exist without permission. One evening, I sat alone in my kitchen, the folder Aunt Caroline had given me spread out across the table. The papers weren't just evidence of sabotage. They were proof of survival. Proof that every step I'd taken despite him. I took a single sheet, an old letter of recommendation that he had once buried, and pinned it to my bulletin board above my desk. Not as a wound, but as a reminder, the things they tried to silence became the soil I grew from. Days later, I received a call. Aunt Caroline's voice carried both hesitation and relief. "He asked me to give you a message," she said. "What kind of message?" She exhaled. "An apology. Not in words he'll ever say out loud. But he told me you proved him wrong, and that he knows he can't take it back." I closed my eyes, letting the quiet fill me. It wasn't the apology I'd wanted as a child. It wasn't the love I'd begged for, or the respect I had earned long before. But it was accountability in its fractured, imperfect form. And maybe that was enough. That night, I took off my jacket and laid it across the chair again. The stars gleamed faintly in the lamplight, no longer heavy, no longer sharp. Just steady, just mine. And as I sat there in the silence of my own making, I realized something important. Revenge had never been about crushing them. It was about reclaiming myself, about showing the world that I could exist loudly, fully without their permission. I whispered the words into the stillness, not for them, but for me. "I'm free. If this ever happened to you, if your family ever tried to shrink you smaller than you were meant to be, just say same in the comments."